Corey, are you interested in other revenue streams for your farm?
Yes.
And you like camping?
I love it.
Harvest Host has connected over 200,000 RVers to a network of thousands of farms, wineries, breweries, and small businesses. All you got to do is give RVers a spot to stay on your farm.
And then they come and buy all the stuff that I want to sell them?
Correct. As a host, it is cost-free to you, and 100% of the money spent on site goes straight back to you. In fact, in 2021, more than $40 million was spent with hosts.
Wow.
Absolutely. If you don't sell produce or products, don't worry about it. You can get creative with farm experiences or branded swag. But if you have an interest, you need to visit harvesthost.com/hosts. That is harvesthost.com/hosts for more information to apply. And you can even set blackout dates or deny RVers if you don't want it.
Sounds like a good deal to me.
Let's check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, farmers, ranchers, and distinguished guests, thank you for listening to the Farm4Profit Podcast, where we discuss the latest ideas, methods, trends, and techniques available to help your farm achieve higher levels of farm profitability. The Farm4Profit Podcast is co-hosted by Tanner Winterhoff, the Iowa Bankerman, and David Whitaker, the Iowa Land Guy, where in tandem they will share their ideas and advice from industry experts. Thank you again for listening to the Farm4Profit Podcast. Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long. And now, here's Tanner and David.
Hey listeners, welcome back to the Farm4Profit Podcast. This is Tanner Winterhoff.
This is Corey Hillebo.
And you're also going to hear Dave pop in on this episode. So we are putting together a couple different conversations we had. But listeners, if you are new to the podcast, this is a Farm4Profit episode. Our other format that comes out on Thursdays are called Farm for Fun shows. But you can connect with us through farm4profitllc@gmail.com for any and all suggestions related to the podcast, Corey.
You can also text or leave us a voicemail at 515-207-9640.
Absolutely. We're going to share one of those text messages with you today. That is a listener review that is brought to you by Ag Leader. Corey, they say cab to cab, season to season. There's only one way to do it on your farm, and that is to Ag Leader it. What does that mean?
I think it just means put Ag Leader in it. It goes, and when they say cab to cab, I think it means brand to brand, color to color. You know, there's so many different brands of tractors out there. It'll go in all of them.
Yeah, kind of like our listeners. Some will listen to the profit show, some listen to the fun shows, and there's a lot of them that listen to all of our shows.
Yeah. They got a solution for every season of the year and whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. So our text message today comes from area code 815. Keep up the great work, the Zoe Camp podcast. What is a domestic partnership question is funny. When you live together so long that you become brother and sister, right?
What?
I don't think that's right. He said, incredibly funny, but hard to concentrate while side dressing corn. When laughing that damn hard, keep up the good work.
Hopefully it didn't run over too much corn.
I know that's not what we wanted these text messages to turn into, but thank you for sending those again. If you want yours read or heard on this podcast, it is 515-207-9640. And like I said, Corey, this is a requested show from our listeners about ways that you can take and get more revenue out of the land that you own. So we went with the approach of potentially taking the least productive portion of your land and finding alternative income sources. So we have 3 conversations today that cover 4 varieties of ways to make money. So we start off talking about ways to use it recreationally with campers and people to patronize your farm business.
Okay.
We then go a little bit more professional on a leasing side that entails hunting leases.
That's big now.
Or long-term leases. Yep. So we get into a conversation like that. And then lastly, we talk wind and solar energy.
Oh, that's big now.
Yeah, so a lot of polarizing topics, a lot of fun topics, but we will splice these together for you. And in an hour, you'll have a lot of opportunities to increase the revenue on your farm.
I can't wait.
Let's start off with a What's Working in Ag segment with Harvest Hosts. We have a full show jam-packed full of great information around alternative sources of ways to earn income from the land that you already have. It's my pleasure to have Joel Holland here. Joel is a technology entrepreneur who loves RVing. He's based out of Colorado, and after he and his wife spent hundreds of nights traveling all 48 of the states, his concern was that there are less RV experiences and more campgrounds available. So they come across Harvest Hosts, I believe. I can't wait to learn his story. And ended up buying this company. So welcome to the podcast, Joel.
Thanks for having me, Tanner. I'm always excited to talk about RVing.
Absolutely. So did I kind of grasp how you came across Harvest Hosts, or what's your version of the story?
No, you did a great job. Basically my wife and I had been living in the Washington, D.C. area. We were driving through traffic every day to go sit in a cubicle. It became pretty soul sucking. And we just looked at each other one day and said, hey, why don't we try this whole road trip freedom thing? She's a veterinarian, and I had been fortunate to basically sell my last company. And so we hit the open road. We bought an RV and just started traveling. And we really wanted to see every part of this country that we hadn't seen yet. And we RV'd through all the lower 48 states, had an absolute blast. And like you mentioned, the thing that surprised me was there are so many beautiful farms and open spaces, yet we couldn't stay there in our RV. And instead, we'd be going to pretty crowded campgrounds, and some, many campgrounds are wonderful. So I don't mean to disparage them, but there are a lot of places we stayed where it just wasn't full of awe, right? Whereas these farms, it's like, oh my goodness, if I can park on that farm and support the local producer, this would be a dream. And in that process, we found this company, Harvest Hosts, which had been started by a husband-wife team in 2009. And they did just that. They brought together 600 at the time, wineries, farms, breweries, that invited RVers to stay overnight for free in exchange for supporting the small business, buying the produce, buying the wine. Loved it. I mean, loved the concept. The first one we stayed at was a farm. It was an alpaca farm in Kansas. It was a wonderful experience. And we loved it so much, we reached out to the founders and said, hey, would you be interested in selling this business? We'd like to take it to the next level. And that's what we did.
And that was probably scary that they said yes.
Well, actually they said no. And so that was actually, and it's funny, you're right. If they just like, sure, have it, I'd be like, oh boy. No, they said, appreciate your interest. We love the business also, and we've really not considered selling it. This is a lifestyle business for us. Why would we sell it? And so I got to know them over the course of a few months and basically said, I'm genuine about wanting to grow this. I don't want to just come in and make money off this. It's not just a capitalistic, heartless thing. We love this community, and we think we could do a lot of good by bringing this to more farms and more RVers. And so we reached a price that worked for them, worked for us. And since then, we've grown it tremendously. There were 600 locations back then. They're now over 3,000 locations in the Harvest Host network, including over 1,000 farms. And farms are our biggest segment, and they're amazing.
And that's why we've got you on, because I don't know if our listeners would think about this as an option to increase revenue. So it benefits the farm by when you have products there, people come, they stay, and then they patronize you for the ability to park and enjoy the beautiful scenery, enjoy the environment, the experience. But does that mean anybody can sign up and become a host location, or how does that work?
Yes. The short answer is yes. If you have property where you've got room for RVers to park, that's all you need, right? And that like our members just want a beautiful place to park for the night. You don't need to provide hookups, no electricity, no water, no dump station. Our members are self-contained. And so they show up, they have everything they need to live in their little box and then leave the next day, taking everything with them they brought. Hopefully though, they take a little extra. Hopefully they also take some of your produce, some of your experiences. And to your point, not every farm sells produce, right? That was the easiest, low hanging fruit, as it were, when we started. But we have a lot of agritourism farms. So farms that provide experiences, rides, corn mazes, Christmas tree farms. So differential experiences. And then for farms who don't have any product to offer, that's okay too. And there's two ways we work with them. One, we can turn on tipping, right? Basically donations. And so our members, right through our website or app, can actually give a little token of thanks to the farm that they visit.
Right.
So our farmers have the option of turning that on. Wonderful option, and I think our average farm makes between $12,000 to $16,000 in additional revenue every year from the program. Well-established farms that have been in the program and are in good locations, they can make upwards of $50,000 or more. And we don't take any of that. That just goes straight to the farm owner. We charge nothing at any time to hosts. There's no charge to be in the program, to join the program. There's no contract. We don't lock you into anything. We basically say, hey, try this out. If you think this is a great fit, we would love to work with you.
That's a big number for someone who is a social butterfly or someone who enjoys getting to meet new people. And the farm owner or the landowner can do that without leaving the comfort of their own property because people will come to them. But what about the concerns that somebody might have about the people that are coming to their property? Is there a vetting process, or how do we get comfortable with who's coming to visit us?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Strangers are scary. And so we do as much as we can to attract the right members. We're very fortunate that RVers in general, especially the travelers, this is an enthusiastic group of essentially vacationers. And they're just really excited to be on the road. They're like my wife and I, like bright-eyed, just pumped, right? And so when they show up, they're generally just happy. They want to learn more about what these farmers are doing. They want to learn about the lifestyle, and they want to give back, right? They want to support. Now, all this is in our code of conduct, and we have a very, very detailed code of conduct, which says things like treat the property like it's your grandmother's, right? Like they treat others like you'd want them to treat your grandmother. Treat it with kindness. Pack out what you pack in. Don't leave a mess. Support the host by making a donation or a purchase. So there's a number of these things, and the hosts can read about this on our website. But our members are very good about following the code of conduct, and the hosts have the ability to rate our members once they stay, and they have the ability to look at the ratings before they stay. So, if you apply to my farm to stay for the night, I'll see right there, this is Tanner's rating, just like an Uber rating. It looks like a nice guy. He's got good reviews. Great, let him in. And then once you stayed, that, my farm, I get to rate you and say he was a wonderful patron, like nice guy. Like there's a couple of things they can rate on. Now, if for whatever reason it wasn't a good experience and the host rates you poorly, immediately that's flagged, and our customer support team looks into it. And it's very rare, but we do kick people out of the program if they're not playing by the code of conduct.
Well, that's good to know, because like you said, that could be the scariest hurdle or the biggest hurdle for some people to get over that would like to join your network. So that's fascinating. I didn't know this existed until I started doing research on ways for farms to make alternative sources of income. And I'm fascinated at how fast you've grown and the network that you had. How was it during COVID? Did you guys have a slowdown, or what did that do to your business?
No, it's interesting. COVID at first, I remember this, March 2020, right? I think it hit everyone the same way. It was just, we were all broadsided and just had no idea what was going to happen. Our industry, like most, completely shut down for a second. We had just new membership acquisition dried up. People weren't traveling. Hosts weren't getting business. We were seeing hosts start to fail from lack of business. It was a scary time. Luckily, when things came back around, RVing was the first form of travel that was truly safe, and scenic and supportive of small businesses. And the tides rushed back in. And so we were very lucky that, at first COVID was scary. After a while, it was very beneficial to the industry because people need to travel. Like I think that travel for a lot of people, myself included, it's like part of our sanity. Yeah. And planes are off the table, international trips are off the table, and people start falling back in love with the Great American Road Trip. So we were right there to support them. So, it's weird to say, but COVID, yes, was a positive thing for the RV community for sure. And a very positive thing, I think, for certain businesses, small businesses that are now getting a lot more attention because people are going back outside and supporting local, right? And staying in their backyards. So there were some benefits from it.
No, that's great. That was an assumption I had. So that's why I wanted to ask, just to get clarification on it. So I assume sending people to harvesthost.com is the best way for them to find more information or just to sign up. Is that right?
Absolutely right. If you have, we're always looking for new hosts. We love our hosts. The program, again, costs nothing. It can be a wonderful experience as a host. You can go to the website, harvesthost.com. There's a link that says for hosts. You can read more about the program. You can actually look at testimonials from other farmers, see why they like the program. And then if you're interested, it's a short form. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your farm. And someone on our team will then reach out and hopefully get you up on our website, and in front of our members pretty quickly. and within days you'll have new visitors. One thing I didn't mention, a relatively new thing, we have a host property protection plan that we rolled out. And so this kind of goes back to your question around like, hey, I'm a little concerned about people showing up that I don't know.
Yeah.
If something happens, if someone like breaks a mailbox or, hits a fence, we do cover, right? We provide coverage to basically get you to make you whole, take care of you, and that's the point of the program. Again, luckily it's very rare. Like we very rarely have incidents, but we want to give our hosts the confidence in knowing that we're there for them if something happens.
Oh, that is awesome. And I know that you guys have really taken my curiosity to the next level because you have set me up with a conversation with one of your top performing host families. And I'm excited to have that conversation. But Joel, thanks for hanging out with us and sharing a little bit about your company. And now let's go talk to one of your hosts to see what it's like from the farm ownership side, the perspective of the host as part of this agreement.
Thanks, Tanner.
All right, listeners, we're going to jump over to one of the top 3 most visited and favorited locations on the Harvest Host platform. It's a pleasure of mine to introduce to you Wendy Barton from Lane Southern Orchards. How you doing, Wendy?
I'm good, Tanner. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, fantastic up here. We got the sun is shining. The studio's nice and cool. It's really hard to complain. How's everything where you're at?
Everything is great in Georgia. We just started harvesting peaches, so we are happy down here and looking forward to our Harvest Host visitors enjoying our sweet Georgia peaches.
I was going to ask, is it you that has the accent or do I have the accent?
I don't know. People tell me I do. They'll call me and say, can you just talk to me?
Oh, that's awesome. I am loving it already. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have going on down there in Georgia?
So our farm was established in 1908. We are the largest grower of peaches and pecans in the United States. We have 11,000 acres. We get about 425,000 visitors a year. During January, February, and March is a really slow time for us. So I just kind of stumbled upon the Harvest Host, and we signed up with them, and it has really proven to be a great program for us, specifically during the times that we're slow. The attendance that we do get, as I mentioned, the majority of those come during peach season, which is the middle of May through August. Then we have a corn maze in October, and then we have a busy mail order business for Christmas shopping. We also have a lot of visitors at the roadside market, but we have a full-service cafe here, too, the Peachtree Cafe and Bakery.
That sounds like someplace I need to come and visit. I'm just sitting here, my mouth is watering, and I can't help, again, the differences. So they're pecans. They're not pecans, correct?
I think it's all in the way your mama said it, because I'll say it's a pecan, but I call it a pecan pie, so I don't know.
That's awesome. But it's fun to hear that you found Harvest Hosts and they're able to help you out. What's the experience like when somebody shows up at your farm that was connected through Harvest Hosts?
Well, they can either call us or register online to request to stay with us. We have to approve every one of the stays. They can just pull into our large parking lot. We ask them to come inside and check in at the mail order department. When they check in, we're capturing their email addresses so we can remarket to them later on after they've left. We tell them just to make themselves at home. They can pull their slides out. They do have to be self-contained as the Harvest Host Code of Conduct. You have to be able to be self-contained. We ask them to let the cashiers know that they are a Harvest Host member. So we try to capture those sales just so we can keep track of that.
Oh, that's really good. So it sounds like there's a nice beneficial relationship between you and the program that Harvest Host has to offer.
Yes, again, it's been very beneficial not only through our slow times, but we've had several members stay 2 and even 3 times. They love coming here to and from. We have easy access. We have I-75, which is the main interstate that runs north to south all the way through the state, and we're just located 5 miles off of I-75.
There you go. So if we've got a listener that is, potentially thinking about reaching out to Harvest Hosts, or expanding the opportunity for their farm business to reach new clients, you'd make a suggestion that they do that?
Yeah, so we started the program in September of 2020, and I didn't even start tracking the sales, unfortunately, until April of 2021. So in 2021, from April to December, what we can tell, we did around $40,000. We know it's probably more than that because a lot of people say, you know, when they check in, they've already purchased things, they've already had breakfast, so it's on a higher end than that. Yearly sales so far this year, what we're able to track, we are coming in around, I could have sworn I did, we're right at about $50,000. Again, that's just the ones that we're able to track. We have had, if you look at people who have requested stays, marked us as they're going to stay maybe later on, it's a total of around 3,800 people that have reached out, either already stayed or interested in staying, and that's just since September of 2020.
Wow, that is great.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got the space and you've got something to sell, it's just a win-win all around. We, again, the customers seem to be loyal to the Harvest Host program, and now they're becoming loyal customers to us here at Lane Southern Orchards.
Hey, I appreciate you jumping on here, Wendy, and sharing your story. If somebody has listened to this and they want to actually find you specifically, how do they go about finding Lane Family Orchards?
So they can, on the internet, we're lanesouthern.orchards.com, or they can call us at 800-27-PEACH.
Awesome. Thank you again for jumping on and sharing us your experience with Harvest Hosts.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
So any farm that is interested in learning more about becoming a host can visit harvesthost.com/hosts or can email them directly at sales@harvesthost.com. Remember the S after hosts. So thank you, listeners. I hope you got value out of that conversation today with Wendy.
Do you have your crop harvesting needs met for this fall? Geringhoff is the best no matter what color or combine you got behind it, making premium harvesting heads no matter the crop. Check them out at geringhoff.com.
And listeners, as we talked about, this is a segmented episode. So now we're going to jump into a conversation that might tug at the heartstrings of those of you that enjoy the recreational side of owning farm ground and how you might be able to monetize that. So let's drop right in on that conversation. All right, our guest today is going to share a unique perspective on a way that recreation can meet agriculture. And it happens more often than we think as far as recreation meeting agriculture, but we also have a lot of our listeners involved in this side of recreation, and we're talking hunting. So pleased to have Sean Furbrash here. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the American Hunting Lease Association. But I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about what he does. Welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Well, thank you, Tanner. I appreciate it. I appreciate you asking to have me today. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, so what do you got going on down there? What do you do for a day?
Well, I spend most of my days and most of my time speaking with landowners and hunters about how they can arrange a hunting lease or a way to access private property that makes the landowners a little money and gives hunters access to property they probably wouldn't have otherwise. So kind of a win-win for everybody. And we've been in business now since 2010. And yeah, we've become, I dare say, one of the thought leaders in this space. So we get a lot of folks looking towards us or for us to just kind of guide them through this. Like we're talking with landowners that own considerable amount of land in some cases, and that's a lot of assets, and they want to make sure if they're going to allow access that they do it right, and that's where we can help them.
So yeah, we're Farm4Profit Podcast, and our listeners listen to us because they are always looking for ways to increase profitability. And that might be by utilizing or putting to use underutilized assets, such as ground that could be used for hunting. So the company that you're talking about is called Base Camp Leasing. So what essentially does Base Camp do for our listeners?
So Base Camp Leasing is a hunting lease broker. Started by a gentleman named Steve Ming back in 2000. Moved to Indiana from Kansas, didn't have a place to hunt. Decided to take the model really from Texas and Louisiana that's been around for nearly 100 years and just kind of bring it to the Midwest. So what Base Camp Leasing does is they go to landowners and they try and secure property and land that the landowners have into their program. They have 65, 70,000 hunters in their pool that are looking for a place to hunt.
Wow.
What Base Camp does is, though, they're a service company, so they will not only send a rep out to your property to kind of give it a once over, to evaluate the market value for hunting and what hunters will pay. And, we're always asked, how much can I expect to charge or to make? Depends. You guys are in Iowa. It's a great place to hunt, but since the state of Iowa kind of restricts hunters, Missouri is a better place. The property value is just a little higher for leasing in Missouri because the tags are over the counter. I can come from Indiana and hunt there. So what Base Camp will do is they'll come out, they'll take pictures, they'll evaluate your property, they'll sit down with the landowners and explain to them exactly how this works, what they should expect, and then, of course, what kind of revenue they can generate. They also provide a $5 million liability policy that protects the landowners from any kind of liability. That's a huge component. And then they do all the legwork. They have a contract that's been reviewed by attorneys for over 20 years and approved. So they have an ironclad contract that favors the landowner probably a little bit, but is also very favorable to the hunter. So they're just the gold standard when it comes to hunting lease brokers and actually finding a place to hunt.
Yeah, so this is all encompassing. I mean, I knew what to expect, but that's a full package. So if a listener wants to go about this without having much knowledge at all, Base Camp's the company that can help take you from start all the way through finish and continue to build multi-year relationships.
Absolutely. Like I said, they're just the gold standard. So, and they're a service group. So, they're not just going to sign up a landowner and say, well, there you go, you're on your own. They'll really work with landowners. One of the things I don't think they realized was when you lease what's called a traditional lease, you're not leasing the land. There's no promise of tenancy or anything past accessing your land. So you're really just leasing hunting rights or access.
Right.
So you're giving up no rights, whatsoever. So they'll do a nice job. Sometimes the landowners say, hey, I need to log this 20 acres, or I'm going to take this particular wood line out. That's not a problem. They go back to Base Camp. Base Camp can readjust, make sure the hunters are aware, and then make any adjustments on the fly. So they're a full service group. And, when I first started here, I was asked by my friends, there's a whole industry around hunting and hunting leases. Yeah, there really is. And, there's tens of thousands of landowners taking part in this, hundreds of thousands of hunters. So it's buttoned up industry for sure. And like I said, Base Camp just at the forefront.
That my mind is just exploding right now with more questions, but I don't want to skip over one thing that you mentioned earlier, and that was liability coverage. So I'm such narrow tracked mind as we record this podcast. I didn't think about that as being an essential, but when you're talking a group of hunters and they're on your property, that's probably really important to the landowner to make sure that they're covered and protected.
Of course it is. And, as a hunter, I feel like I have to say, hunting is one of the safer recreational activities we have. It's proven. But if you're a landowner and you're charging a fee or accepting payment for access, that throws you into a bit of a different level of responsibility. And so, and again, either American Hunting or Base Camp can walk a landowner through, here's what you should do. Take a ride around your property. If you're an absentee landowner, have somebody take a look around it. Let's mark it. Let's post it. Let's make maps. Because we want it to be as safe as possible, obviously.
Right.
But you don't want anybody out there accidentally injuring themselves or, frankly, creating any kind of property damage accidentally, which we've had irrigation pumps and equipment accidentally shot. And so the landowner has some recourse. The liability policy goes both ways. It protects the landowner and the hunters. So any type of property damage or personal injury caused to the other accidentally is a reason to file a claim.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that's good. That's good to know that there are protections in place. I mean, you'd like to trust everybody, but just like you said, you fall into a different category when money exchanges hands. It becomes more of a business relationship, and we want our listeners to be protected. But if I've got a listener that's interested in this, where is Base Camp operating out of? Do you cover all the states, or is it kind of a limited territory?
Well, Base Camp's in 25 states, I believe now, with about 30 different agents in the country, mostly in the Midwest, really starting to expand into the South. New York, Maryland, big states for Base Camp. So it's really an expanding company, just I think based on the reputation and what they offer. So, one of the things I think when you talk about you want to trust people, of course you do. And you can trust folks. And the other thing is a lot of landowners, farmers in particular, they'll either work on a handshake because they're generous, caring people, or they will have somebody sign a quick waiver. The problem with the waiver, and I would encourage everybody to sign a waiver in addition to contracts, because it's just another level of protection. But your wife didn't sign that waiver. And if there is some sort of catastrophe that happens, and it's rare, but they do happen.
Sure.
Where you're left or the hunter is left unable to provide for their family. And now, the wife is faced with trying to raise a family and that might not be, sufficient for her, then she's well within her rights to file a lawsuit, typically. Now, honestly, the injuries we see are almost always somebody falling out of a tree stand that they hung. So there's nobody to blame there except for themselves. So there is no liability there. One thing about liability coverage, I tell everybody, is it never pays you. It pays somebody else on your behalf.
That's fair.
That's what it's for.
Yep, that's right. So any of our listeners with land can participate, but kind of like you said, a lot of our listeners work on handshakes. So do they get the opportunity to actually meet the hunters that are on the opposite end of the lease?
They can. They can ask Base Camp as a stipulation. Typically, Base Camp doesn't do that. They've got a pool of hunters, and they just match the hunters with the landowners. But absolutely, if a landowner said, I want to meet the hunters prior to that, that can all be worked out. And you asked me a little bit ago where they can go. It's basecampleasing.com. It's very simple.
There you go.
And if you want just some generic information on leasing in general, you can go to ahuntinglease.org, which is where the American Hunting Lease lives.
Oh, yeah, that would be helpful. So when you get started, if they go out there and they venture into getting looked up, is there a cost to the landowner? Is there a fee to get started if I own land and want to work with Base Camp?
There is absolutely no fee. All they need to do is reach out through basecampleasing.com or call them on the phone. It's another thing that's fantastic about them is they will answer the phone. They're in Indiana. They'll answer the phone and they will talk to you up front. They'll get an agent scheduled to come out and have a look, or they'll actually have the agent reach out to the landowner directly, and they'll schedule time to come out and walk the property. And if the landowner wants to walk with them, that'd be great. And then, like I said earlier, they'll sit down and they'll go over everything. But there's no cost. They take a commission once it leases, and that's it. It's extremely simple.
It does. It sounds like it is. Now, let's get into some of the nitty gritty here. Just some quick one-off questions that I already got when I floated this around to a couple listeners. But who's responsible for listing the property? So if you come out and walk, I don't have to do anything, correct? You take the photos, you do everything that's necessary to be posted out there for the hunter pool to look at it.
Exactly. Okay. So they list it. Base Camp Leasing will list your property for you. They've got certain levels of membership that have first look at new leases. And frankly, it's pretty rare that the good lease goes any further than that. It's funny, they go out to the wall hanger members Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, of which I am a wall hanger member.
Yep.
And I know by the time I get on 15, 20 minutes after the email went out, most of the time a good one's already gone.
So you're kind of at a supply and demand here to where the supply is low and the demand is high.
The supply is almost non-existent and the demand is off the chart. COVID-19 had a lot to do with the increase in hunter numbers.
Yep.
Supply and demand was a little out of whack before the pandemic, and now it's even more so. I read that I think there was like 11 million hunters in 2016. The U.S. Division of Fish and Wildlife does a report every 5 years. They did one in 21, but we haven't seen it yet. And I think there were 39 million licenses sold in the country in 21. Some of that's a duplicate, but the average or the estimate is that it's going to be up somewhere in the 15 to 20% range of new hunters entering the sport, and they need a place to hunt. So if you are a landowner and you have that kind of supply, there's frankly just never been a better time to get maximum value for your land than there is right now.
Right. And being farm for profit, and the whole reason we put this episode together is to find alternative income sources for underutilized assets. And that sounds like this could be a really good fit. But now I'm going to try and relate. I'm relating this to like a rental house. If I lease out a house, I no longer have access to the house. Is that the same way it goes for my ground? Does these
Absolutely not.
Okay, so how's
Absolutely
that work?
not. That's what I mentioned a little bit ago. You're only leasing out the recreational access or rights to your property. You are a farmer, you're a landowner, and you have full right to do everything you need to do for that land. Whether it's, I need to put cattle out in that pasture, I need to remove that woods, I need to cut firewood, anything you need to do is you're absolutely welcome and free to do that. You just have to know that you want your customers or your guests or your lessees to come back year after year.
Right.
And so you want to make sure you provide a good experience for them. So, let's say you have a family reunion at your farm and you have people out and they're riding ATVs or they're doing whatever it is they do. If you could have that family reunion in the summer and not in October,
right,
that would be very welcome. On behalf of hunters. So there's things you can do and there's a balance, but to directly answer your question, you lose absolutely no rights when you lease access to your property.
Okay, so if I end up making a connection some other way or my land sells, is this barring me from terminating a lease? How do I end the relationship with Base Camp if something in my life comes up to where it just needs to be time to be done?
Well, I know I think there's a 30 or 60 day notice when you just want to end the lease. They're a year-long lease.
Yep.
So the leases they do, they're traditional. They're for one full year. People do sell. Boy, the last couple of years, the real estate market's been crazy. I lost my lease in Kentucky. But the landowner, you just call Base Camp, you talk to Base Camp, and they will facilitate or negotiate kind of a peaceful resolution. Sometimes they take a look at like how long was the lease in place? Did it go through deer season, which is 98% of the leases?
Right.
And they'll talk to both. They'll help you negotiate that exit from the program. And it's typically always very amicable. And, they want to keep customers on both sides. They hope as a landowner, you see their value and that you come back. And as hunters, we want you to hunt with us somewhere. So, what can we work out? And like I said, it's almost always amicable after the initial blast of, hey, you can't hunt there anymore. And I have felt that heartache and that kick in the gut. And, it was 2 years ago and I'm already off to a better place.
Oh, I totally get it. I do. Before I switch over to what it's like on the experience side for a hunter, is there anything that we missed to the landowner that you'd like to share about Base Camp?
Well, I don't think so. I think we really covered it. There are, with the advent of social media, or on Facebook, there are some guys doing a little bit of their own type thing.
Sure.
I would just be leery. The two things that you have to have are you have to have a liability policy in place and you have to have a tried and true contract.
Yep.
Other than that, there are other avenues, but I just always come back to Base Camp. Even as a hunter, I go through Base Camp because I just know everything's taken care of and I can hunt safely and responsibly wherever I choose.
So can you give us any type of a ballpark range as to what a lease would be worth to the landowner?
Sure. Let me be kind of general.
Yep.
As far as
That's
the
all we're asking
Midwest
for.
goes, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, that's probably pretty much everywhere on quality habitat. And the farmer knows. There are no experts like the farmers. They see
That's
the
true.
deer.
Yep.
I always tell the hunters, I'm always like, hey, don't forget to visit the farmer while you're out there because he's the person who'll say, oh, you should see this giant, 150 that comes out over here under this oak tree.
Right. Uh-huh.
That's where I'm going to go. They're getting as much as $50 an acre right now on huntable ground. If you own 200 acres and there's 2 acres of woods on it,
Right.
you're not going to get 50 times all of it.
Yep.
So, but if you've got quality habitat with some diversity, you can get anywhere between really $30 and $50 an acre, 50 on the high end, 30 on the low end. Depends on the county, the state, all that kind of stuff. So, and the history. I mean, if you've got pictures of some of the bucks that have been taken off of your property, that's just helps them even more so. So, yeah, it can be significant revenue.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. So now let's switch to the hunter side because I know we've got listeners that also enjoy the recreation side. What's that like? What's the experience like if someone wants to go out to Base Camp and start getting on the waiting list is what it sounds like?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would join the Wall Hangers Club. I think it's $200 a year, something along those lines.
Yep.
And then you get first look when they sign up new leases, new landowners. They put them out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you get first look at them. You have the exact same chance, the opportunity that everybody else does. So you got to know in the area you're looking for. Like say I'm looking for Indiana, southern half, 100 acres or more. I look at that every time it comes out. And when I see one come down, I take a look at it. So that's what I would suggest. But it's a free site as well. You can go there right now and you can look at all of the leases they have. Even the ones that are leased are typically listed without the price and without the location. So, yeah, I think they have allowed me to. I'm a city guy. I'm a retired Indianapolis fireman. And so I'm born and raised in the city. I don't have family that owns land. The prospect of me owning a couple of 100 acres, especially in this market, is really zero. And with the idea of leasing access, I'll never consider owning that kind of a chunk of ground, because for $6,000-$7,000 split 4 or 5 ways with my friends that also hunt,
right,
we can hunt some of the best habitat in this country. I know when I go there with my grandson, nobody else is going to be in my tree stand. Nobody else is going to be there. We can hang, and when you lease for a full year. So it's not just deer season. You can hang cameras. You can put out mineral licks. You can shed hunt. You can turkey hunt. It's a recreational lease that allows you to use that property like it was your own for a full year. And we were just talking this morning. I'm getting ready to put up a box blind for the first time ever. But I'm looking forward to it. I talked to my landowner. I said, "Do you mind?" He said, "Absolutely not." He even said, "If you guys want to park your camper out there and camp, you can."
Oh, that's cool.
I thought we were going to do that until I got out there and saw where we would park it. I was like, "This is the hub of the whole property." So no, we'll stay off. But yeah, it's just and now he and I have become friends, and so it's just a win all around, and it allows me to hunt property that I would never be able to hunt.
So that sparked another question. You just mentioned friends. So is there a way to use Base Camp Leasing to make sure all the ducks are in order if a landowner already has connected with a hunter?
Yes. Yeah, you can contact Base Camp Leasing. I think there are rare instances where a landowner might say, "Hey, listen, my nephew is already hunting here. I don't want to kick him off. He's going to bring 3 friends. What can we work out?" I think, and I don't want to speak for the guys at Base Camp, but I'm fairly certain they can work something like that out with you.
Awesome. That's great. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, I'd like for you to close out with contact information, how people can get a hold of Base Camp, where the best place to get started is at.
Yeah, the first thing I would do is go to basecampleasing.com. Since I'm talking to mostly landowners, there is a landowner portal and a landowner page that will explain their entire program. And then if it just piques your interest a little bit, just give them a call. You can speak to any of the ladies that will answer the phone. They can answer all your questions. If you'd like to speak with one of the managers, you can even ask for one of the managers. They would help you out as well. I don't know their phone number off the top of my head. If you want just information generally on leasing and on how it works, you can reach out to us. It's ahuntinglease.org, our American Hunting Lease Association, 866-782-6330. And that one I do know.
Awesome. And I will stick the phone numbers in the show notes for you listeners, so you don't have to jot them down right now while you're on the road. We will have those and have access. But Sean Furbrash, I appreciate you joining us and sharing with the listeners here on Farm for Profit another way that they might be able to put their land to work for them.
Hey, I appreciate it. I really like the podcast. I've listened to it a couple of times now since we hooked up, and it's nice. I think a lot of folks probably shortchange farmers that they're actually business people.
Oh, yeah.
And because they get their hands dirty doesn't mean they don't understand ROI and alternative revenue streams and operational costs and all those things. So, this is a way we can bring everybody together and kind of educate everyone at the same time and make some money.
Absolutely. We catch that firsthand, knowing that this was one of the topics that they requested. There is certainly business mindset behind each one of these farmers, especially those that are successful. But Sean, thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a good one.
Great. Thanks, Tanner. I appreciate it.
And listeners, one more clip for you here that hopefully brings value. And we're coming back to the state of Iowa for this guest today that is going to talk about wind and solar energy and how that could be an alternative income source for your farm. All right, now let's expand our knowledge on different resources for landowners here. We have another great guest, Al Zeitz. He is the manager of renewable energy services at Iowa Lakes Electrical Cooperative. So, Dave, can you guess when I give you that title, what we're going to talk about next?
It's something electrical, I'm guessing. Yeah,
absolutely.
And in Iowa, we're talking farming. Probably something with wind.
Yep. So we've got Al here who's an expert on both the wind and the solar side. I know that there's, I'm not going to say love-hate. I mean, I already said love-hate, but there's varying sides of the spectrum for what a wind farm looks like and those who are acceptable and appreciative. But we want to attack today what the ROI is and how those relationships look. So welcome to the podcast, Al.
My pleasure.
So you've got career experience working with wind and solar. What types of positions have you held in your career?
Well, I've been working basically in the wind industry for, probably close to 30 years now. Started out as a wind technician, just kind of elevated up through the ranks, was a site supervisor, and actually ended up starting a training program for wind technicians here at the college in Esterville.
Okay, so
when you're saying wind technician, you're the guy that's doing what? Help me understand what a wind technician does.
Well, a wind technician is basically the technician that takes care of the wind turbines, to operations and maintenance on the turbines themselves.
Got it. So now, if we're staying focused on the topic today of helping our listeners make more money off of their land in maybe some unconventional ways, how can a farmer make money using a wind turbine and their land?
Well, probably the biggest bang for their buck is to use it to offset their energy usage. Just selling the power off of one or even two wind turbines probably isn't very lucrative. To really make some money selling wind energy, you'll probably have to have a very large project and multi-megawatt size, probably talking anywhere from 30 to 100 megawatts.
So the wind farms that we see driving down the road, and I say wind farms when you see like lines of 6 about every quarter mile, and you can see the red lights blinking at nighttime. When you see a wind farm like that, that's not farmer owned then.
Well, a number of years ago, it was a little more lucrative to do that. There were some farmer groups that put together small projects. Those were basically financed by a finance company, sometimes John Deere in many cases, financed these projects, and they are actually farmer owned. But the market has changed a little bit. The price you're getting for electricity wholesale isn't as much as it used to be. So the smaller projects are really hard to make it work nowadays.
So what's the average return? I pay, when I lived in town, I paid about 9 cents per kilowatt hour. I live out of town now. I pay about 14 cents kilowatt hour. And the wind turbines that I've looked into, the return on it, they would pay me 3 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yes, a lot of the contracts that have been signed here in the last couple of years are down to 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour.
Wow.
Okay, gotcha.
So that kind of helps put things in perspective.
So we're really just trying to offset any electrical that we would use on our farm to make it the juice worth the squeeze.
Yeah, if you're going to own a wind turbine, that's probably the best way to approach that.
Now, what about, so my mother and father-in-law own wind turbines, the big tall ones you're talking about, Tanner. Now they get income as the farm lease is what they're getting.
So they own the land underneath the wind turbine.
That's correct.
They don't actually own the wind turbine.
They don't own the wind turbine, but I think they're making $10,000 a year with an annual increase after so many years on a 50-year contract. Is that kind of typical?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be the other way to make some money off of wind turbines is to host a few on your property. And you're absolutely right. There is annual easement payments for the use of that property for each wind turbine that's on the land. The easement payments will vary according to the size of the wind turbine. Typically, the larger the turbines, the larger the payment will be. In some instances, there will also be additional funds based off of the production of the turbines as well.
Okay, so we're talking, this is a payment for an easement. It's not necessarily a land lease.
That's correct.
So, if to our listeners, if they have somebody coming to them and they're like, I want to put wind turbine on your land, and I want to lease it. Of course, they want to do the best job they can. They want to get the most money out of that. If they're trying to do that, is it best for them to get all their eggs in a basket, go talk with the other farmers? So like me and Tanner, we're both neighbor farmers. Is it good for me to go to Tanner and say, hey, I was approached by this company. Let's start a co-op, if you will, together, and then make sure we get the top price, so that Tanner's not taking a really good guy deal and I'm taking a crappy deal.
I think that would be good advice to get together and talk amongst each other. Absolutely.
So every once in a while, we catch wind of town hall hearings or public hearings to where there seems like there is a lot of opposition against having windmills or wind turbines in place. But to our listeners who are landowners, and we're just talking specifically today about ways to make additional revenue, are there any downfalls? What would you say would be obvious downfalls to hosting a wind turbine on your property?
To be honest, I really can't come up with the downside of doing that. If aesthetics, I guess, could be one thing, but there's a lot of other things out there, like cell towers, power lines themselves. They dot the environment out there, so I can't really say that would be an issue. It's another revenue stream for the landowners. The money that you make off of the footprint of that wind turbine would be a lot more than if you actually raise corn on that same property.
Yeah.
There's tax revenue that comes in for the county and the state. I can't see any downside of it.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of right now as you were talking is having to pick the planter up and turn around rather than just hitting that AB line and going all the way from fence to fence.
Agreed. There are some inconveniences, but I would hope that the easement payments would make that a lot easier.
Well, and Tanner, I know at my father-in-law's place, although they have to adjust their AB line, they also get the really stout road that's built into where the easement is. And so now they got a spot to park their grain trucks.
That's true. Yeah. Both could. Yeah. It's probably more of a benefit than it is a headache for having a road in place.
Yeah. So how are these, well, we call them leases, I guess, but you're calling them easements. How are the easements structured? I mentioned that my family's is 50 years. Are they all that way? Or what's our listeners, if they're being approached, what are they looking for?
Well, it's been a number of years since I've been involved in working with those agreements, with the exception of the ones we have here with the co-op. There are a number of different structures out there. Some of them are for 20 years or 25 years, but there will be some possible extensions based off of what's going to happen with the wind turbines. The easements are usually just an agreement to make sure that there is not any buildings or anything built in a way that would disrupt the wind flow through the turbines, and also not allowing anybody else to put a wind turbine on the property as well. That's really kind of the basics of the easement.
So I always wondered, okay, we got a wind turbine out in the middle of nowhere. It's spinning around. It's creating electricity. How do we get the electricity back to town? Is there an easement for underground power lines? Is there transformers? Like how's that get sent to town?
Well, that's a good question. The power that's generated by the wind turbines basically go back to whoever's purchasing that power. It could be a local power company. Like for us, the electricity generated by our wind turbines actually goes back to our power provider, Corn Belt Power.
Okay.
And they turn around and distribute that power back to the distribution co-ops.
Gotcha. So I know our listeners are going to be curious. You mentioned 20, 25-year agreements. Is that the useful life of turbines these days? Or what are you seeing for our listeners if they have an idea of how long that's going to be useful to standing there spinning, generating energy?
There are a lot of cases out there that will say that the turbines will last well beyond 20, 25 years. A lot of repowering, what we call repowering, is taking place right now, where They will put a new set of blades up, and sometimes longer blades, a little larger generator, but the foundation and tower will stay there. So that's basically giving new life to the wind turbines, and you can expect another 15, maybe another 20 years, depending on the condition of the foundation out of those turbines.
Okay, Tanner. So we're getting money from an easement. We're getting potential money per kilowatt hour. We're offsetting energy. Other ways to make money on this. Okay, we might have got a road, so we got some convenience. Is there a tax advantage? Is there a green credit that the government's going to pay me for putting one of these up or having it on my farm?
Well, there are some tax incentives out there, mostly the federal, but some states do have some tax incentives as well.
Okay.
One incentive called an ITC, if I remember correctly, it's basically a tax credit based off of the proposed cost of the project. And it'll basically offset, I think, like 30% of the cost of the project. Then there's a tax credit for the production side, so you get a percentage, and I can't remember where they are right now, but you get a tax credit for every kilowatt hour that's produced. It could be a penny or a penny and a half, up to 2 cents, possibly. I'm not sure where that's at right now.
When I talked about those meetings, those town hall meetings, and there's a perception that sometimes landowners don't have a choice of where windmills go. Is that a myth or is that an accurate assumption?
I would say that's a myth. They always have a choice. Now, the wind turbines are placed based off of what a meteorologist has studied the wind patterns through there. And they're also going to take the highest elevation off of a parcel of property to get the best production. But if a landowner steps up and says, you know what, this really isn't in a good line for the way I farm my property, or if they'd like to have it placed somewhere else for a reason, they can do that. Obviously there might be some pushback if they want to put it in a hole or a very low place on a property. That's
right.
Definitely going to reduce the production of the wind turbine. But I'm not going to say that that's a hard and fast rule that they don't have a choice where the wind turbine goes. I really believe they do.
Tanner, that blows my mind. I never would have guessed that you had a choice. If it affected my farming, we move it another 20 feet this way. I always thought that they just told us where it was going to go.
Right, absolutely. But we've got Al on here from Iowa Lakes Electric Cooperative that has expertise in another form of electricity gathering methods, also, and that's solar. So are we going to be able to draw some comparisons between the conversation we just had about wind turbines to solar, or is it a whole different animal?
Well, I think solar basically is about the same. These large projects that are going in, I believe the easements are set up the same way. Obviously, the solars are going to take a much larger footprint of property. So there are obviously some differences there on how that's handled.
So does a solar farm have to be only ground mounted units, or could we look at doing this on buildings that we have on our land?
Absolutely. There are a number of members out there that have installed solar panels on their buildings, machine shed, corn cribs. So that is an avenue to take if you don't have the land space, or I know of a couple people have actually done both. They've utilized some ground mount and put the rest on top of a building.
So we're probably, for our listeners, we're probably talking two different things here. One is the local farmer that maybe wants to offset energy costs, and they put a smaller system on a shop, machine shed, corn crib, etc. on their farm. And then we have actual solar farms, right, Al, that are large, expansive, automatically turn. They're maintenanced by a cooperative company that really the farmer's just giving them the ground.
That's correct.
Okay,
Correct.
just I'm making sure we have two different types of solar that we're talking here. Yep.
So when you see it in your experience, Al, which is more common, the farmers owning the panels themselves or the larger solar farms that are on leased ground?
So from what I've seen in our area, the majority, if not all the landowners have just purchased, installed some solar arrays just to offset their energy usage. And again, that's probably the biggest bang for their buck. If you want to sell electricity using solar, yeah, you'll have to build a very large project to do that.
And if I remember from a previous class, there's hydroelectric and then then there's something else. There's another kind that some people use it to heat the water in their house, correct? Hydrovoltaic.
Solar thermal.
Solar thermal. There we go.
Photovoltaics is generation of electricity.
There we go.
Look at you trying to be smart.
Hydro is water. That's not electric. Yeah, solar voltaic is what it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, Al, do you have any good resources for our listeners if they're curious about generating more income on their land using wind or solar to create electricity, that they could go out and venture to start doing some of their own homework?
Sure, absolutely. The first one that comes to mind is go to the National Renewable Energy Lab's website. NRL has done a lot of research in solar and wind, and I think they'd find a lot of good information there.
Gotcha.
That's NREL .gov, I believe.
So, question for you. I've been looking at putting solar panels on my shop. One of the reasons I was kind of interested is because somebody told me I could write off the cost of the shop because there was a government rebate, something that basically it's not just the solar panels, it's the mounting system too. Well, in my case, the mounting system was my brand new shop.
I don't know about that.
Is there any truth to that?
We were trying.
I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
No worries. And then the next thing is so now that I shopped for it once on Facebook, every day I get like something like, hey, solar panels, your area, solar this, solar that, Elon Musk wants to put them on your house, etc. Is it best to trust a bigger company that's a nationwide company or your local cooperative?
Well, as far as purchasing panels and have somebody install them, local cooperatives don't perform that.
They don't. Okay, that's good to know.
They do not install. They do not maintain. At least I don't know of any that do.
Well, that's good information to have.
But there is a good point that can be raised from that. Larger companies that have been in business for a longer period of time, probably be a better idea to go with them. Traditionally in the solar industry, especially, there's a lot of companies that have gotten started, been in business for 2 or 3 years, and then gone out of business or went bankrupt. And then you're left holding the bag with equipment that can't be maintained very easily.
So where do you see the marketplace right now as far as technology? I mean, I grew up with wind towers on our farm, wind turbines, and I consider them one of the first wind turbines to go up. And technology has come a long ways. I mean, we're talking 4-post base with cross frame that goes up to the turbine, and now we've got single pedestal. Where are we at? Have we reached peak performance on wind energy and solar, or is there still a lot of advancement coming down the pipe?
Well, there's advancement on both sides. On the solar side, a lot of the panels that are being installed nowadays are called bifacial panels, and they can actually generate electricity from sunlight that's absorbed both sides of the panel. So if you will, especially in the wintertime around here, bifacial panels are really efficient because they'll take the sunlight that's being bounced off of the snow and generate electricity that way on both sides of the panel itself. So that's one advancement. Another advancement is the inverters that collect the energy and turn it to AC so it's usable. They're becoming a lot more efficient as well. On the wind side, wind turbines, if we're talking large utility scale, they're getting bigger, better, more efficient, and less maintenance involved as well. So the turbines you're seeing installed nowadays are in the 4 to 5 megawatt range, where just 5-6 years ago, the big ones were 2, maybe 3 megawatts in size. So the wind turbine is definitely getting bigger and more efficient.
So I got a couple more questions for you. One is, I had a guy come out and meet at my house, and so I'm one of those farmers that was looking to put this on my building. And what they wanted to do was either sell us all the equipment right away, or the deal was, oh, we'll credit you for your credits you're giving us, and it'll be cost-free. And basically, you're taking a loan from us for the equipment over the next 20 years, and we're just going to take your payment, and they've sized the system appropriately that we would make enough to basically pay it back. So we didn't have, just like we'd have a monthly electric bill, instead we had a monthly payment for the equipment, but then we didn't have an electric bill. Is there a better way? Maybe it's a finance question more than it is the other, but I got to imagine as a business, they're going to make more money if I'm paying them interest on the loan. Maybe better to just buy it outright.
Yeah, that might be a better way to go. I hadn't heard of this, to be honest with you.
It must be all over our area because I think the same guy stopped at my house.
Did he? Yeah. No, they had a whole program put together on their computer of how much you'd save based on, et cetera, et cetera.
Did he have to call back to his boss to get you a better deal?
He did.
If you signed up right now?
He did. So that's why I was asking. And then the only other question I have is, as a realtor, I sell houses, farms, land, etc. Is any of this transferable, or what do we need to know to transfer it to the next person? Do we just call like the garbage when we sell a house and say, hey, there's a new person, we need a new lease on the garbage? Or is there some other transferable contract that we need to know about when we're selling or buying?
Well, that's a good point to bring up. Good question. So for us, for example, if we have a member that decides to sell their property and it has a wind turbine or a solar array on it, we need to have a new agreement signed with the new owner. So yeah, we need to be notified of that.
That's why you work with a licensed real estate professional to help you navigate that process. But good question, Dave. Well, Al, we really appreciate you spending the time that you did with us. Did we miss anything that you want to hit before we send you off?
Well, I really can't think of anything right now. I think we pretty much hit everything.
That's great. Well, you've been a great value to our listeners and helping us on this show where we're trying to find alternative income sources for our farmland. So again, this was Al Zeitz with Iowa Lakes Electrical Cooperative. We will make sure that we get that information put in the show notes. So if you're curious about wind or solar energy, you can get to some good resources and start doing some investigating for yourself. But thanks again, Al.
My pleasure. You guys have a good day.
All right, listeners, that was an hour jam-packed with information. We messed around in the beginning to say hello and thank you for your time. We're going to say that again. Thank you for sticking around with us. Hopefully you found value in this episode. If you know of other ways that our listeners can make money from their land, other than these topics that we suggested, Corey, let's have them send us an email, farm4profitllc@gmail.com, or text it to us, 515-207-9640. But until next time, have a good one.
Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long.